Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, March 31st, last day of March. The Ides was correct. We were, in fact, just before halfway point. And as it turns out, there was just about as much March after the Ides as there was before. So, well done there in timing the Ides of March. Now on to the Ides and Tides of April, I guess, when that happens. All right. This is it, wrapping up March of 2021. How was it compared to March of 2020? Did you enjoy it? Was it better? Were you less locked down? Were you vaccinated? All right, we have much to check in on, of course, on the pandemic front. Greg Dworkin will join us to discuss some of that. People have, let's say, lots to add to that one today. I saw some discussion today about the chicken and egg question of whether or not, well, first of all, I suppose, whether or not people were actually now seeking out vaccines. Some people claim at the advice of their doctor, seeking out vaccines when it was difficult to find in their area by looking for the reddest county, the most heavily Trump voting county in their area, and then trying to get vaccinated there and finding that they were having some success. And I guess the anecdote is supposed to illustrate that, I guess, either vaccine hesitancy or just outright rejection, or others were saying, is it the chicken and egg question? What was leading to the greater availability of appointments for vaccinations in these red counties? Was it really happening, for one thing? And was it that there was more vaccine hesitancy there, or is it that there's just lower population density there because the more rural counties tended to be the more red voting and Trump supporting? An interesting question, but we'll see whether the stories hold up. I had seen this tweeted around anecdotally, but and I don't know if I saved the thing, but I shared it again this morning with someone who was asking questions about it. But there is definitely there's now a news write-up about it. Pardon me, a news write-up about it at the Daily Beast. Vaccine hunters target Trump counties for easy appointments. So we can dive into that and see whether they have questions about which came first. Benji Sarlin was tweeting it around today and saying, I've seen this discussed anecdotally, but I'm not clear that the people I heard it from were saying that they were really targeting Trump counties so much as rural counties. But I definitely saw the story told as it being about advice from the doctor to look for the reddest county around you. So, it's something we could discuss that might take your mind off of other things, like, say, for instance, we're not going to be able to avoid it. Matt Gaetz has got himself embroiled in, what should, or in ordinary times, and we're still not back in ordinary times here yet, would be some sort of career-ending scandal. But, of course, the elements of it haven't been proven yet. He denies everything about it. And even more than that, he has a crazy story that he's concocted, or hey, maybe it's true, that his entire family, and you'll recall that his father is and was a politician first, and basically brought Matt into the family business and, allowed him to, I think he took his father's seat in the lower chamber of the state legislature when his dad moved to the Senate or something like that. I don't know. I don't remember the exact details, but basically it was a family business. So now he claims that even though he's risen higher than his dad, I'm sure his dad is a big power broker still in Florida. And though being in Congress would technically outrank somebody in the state legislature, if you're running the show in the state legislature versus a backbencher who does nothing in Congress, okay, I guess Dad may still have the upper hand there. But at any rate, it's his claim that they're now all being extorted and that the FBI is really investigating that. And this allegation of Gates' own wrongdoing is all just a big misunderstanding. Like I said yesterday, it's a great attitude to take it. He's turning the excuse from trafficant into traffic can. Jim Trafficant, you may remember, drummed out of Congress and claimed that the charges against him were really a result of the misunderstanding of his private sting operation against, I don't remember, whoever it was that he was accused of taking money from, that ended up resulting in his conviction. An expulsion from Congress, by the way. I think probably the last guy actually expelled from Congress. Anyway, Kagro in the Morning's radio show is live now. We are reliably informed by a guy who I don't think has taken any bribes whatsoever from Jim Trafficant or anyone else, Bill in Portland, Maine. I mean, it may turn out not to be true. This may be how he pays for all the food for the squirrels. I don't know. I don't know a lot about that. People are saying that this is the case, but somebody ought to look into it, is the way the other guy would have handled it. All right, so let's see. The morning radio show is live, and I haven't even finished the tweet yet. Kagro X, me, David Waldman, and now Greg Dworkin, who joins us. Just came up with a new bumper sticker slogan for the Republican cult. This is a good one. I like this one. It's true. If there's no victim, it's not worth doing. That's from the Morning Post today, discussing. I'm the victim of this one here. All right, Abby's come in to do laundry. That's okay. We can handle those sorts of things. But yeah, thinking about this last night as I was posting for the morning, I found myself perhaps unduly gleeful about Matt Gaetz having this difficulty because, like I say, it could, well, as people sometimes say, it couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. It shouldn't happen to a nicer guy than Matt Gaetz, but that's okay because he's one of the worst guys around. The only problem with it is that the allegations are such that someone has been the victim of his possibly criminal activity and certainly his unethical activity and a wish for a victimless crime. I want Matt Gaetz to disappear of his own accord and not hurt anybody, but like I said, you're just not going to find a lot of Republicans committing victimless crimes because when cruelty is the point, if there's no victim, whatever it is just not worth doing. And as Bill says, Frank Luntz couldn't have said it better. I wouldn't allow him to, not on this show anyway, so it wouldn't make a difference whether he could do a better job or not. Greg Dworkin and Abby are both here today. Greg, do you need a treat of some kind?
It's Wednesday. Okay. Wednesday's garbage day. So.
Are they coming early?
Well, they're actually building a fence across the street. So Abby hears the trucks go up and down on her road without her permission and gets very upset about it sometimes.
Yeah, I think
so. She just likes to let people know
whose
road that really is.
Yeah, talk to the county about that, and don't let them have construction permits unless they check with you.
Yeah, well, county executive function in Connecticut is basically non-existent. Oh. Which is why we have hundreds of towns and we have regions, but the counties don't do squat.
Not even the cardboard
just so people know. Oh, well, why don't you talk to your county? Because it wouldn't do any good.
Oh, well, all right then.
Nobody to call.
Why don't you drop by the Earl's place and see if you can get him to pull rank?
See, but the point is, this is infrastructure.
Big house at Downton Abbey.
And infrastructure is going to be today's theme.
Oh, yes, right.
It's so good that Matt Gaetz is really into infrastructure because he got himself in the news that way. The other name that's trending I thought was pretty funny is Jim GYM Jordan.
Oh, yeah.
Because he finally has something he can look the other way about. And
right.
So, it was the whole thing that was missing from this scandal. So I went back to, this happens to be a Washington Post piece, but Orlando Sentinel's covering this fairly well, too. Ex-GOP official Joel Greenberg.
Yes.
What's that got to do with anything? Flaunted ties to Matt Gaetz. Then he was charged with child sex trafficking. Apparently, what this guy did, he was a low-level official, a tax collector, GOP, very Trumpy. Mm-hmm. And he would steal people's identity. Then make fake IDs out of them.
Oh.
And then go around and do stuff. He claimed he was doing it undercover.
Like trafficking.
Yeah. So he was doing it undercover, but what he was also doing is following girls and finding out about them and using a Florida database with his access to what's going on there. And then he was claiming that Matt Gaetz is his best buddy.
And he was.
So on Tuesday, this story says, the case against Greenberg, 36, gained national prominence after the New York Times reported it had also sparked a separate criminal probe into allegations that Gaetz had sex with a teenage girl. So, I mean, the story makes it sound like Joel Greenberg is a, is a wannabe Ghislaine Maxwell type, Jeffrey Epstein type.
Well,
but that remains to be seen. Of course, he's innocent until proven guilty, but that's the allegation.
Sure he is.
And so Matt Gaetz is also alleged to have a sexual relationship with a 17-year-old girl, which is under investigation. He goes ballistic and then goes on Tucker Carlson claiming that, actually what's going on here is he's being extorted by the Department of Justice.
Yes.
And his father's wearing a wire in order to try to figure out what's going on here. So that elicits what's been called on Twitter the Tucker Pucker. That's where Tucker scrunches up his face and says, I don't really understand what's going on. Can you explain this? And so Gaetz go ahead and explains it even further, making further allegations that haven't even been made public about pictures existing and so on and so forth. So Jim Jordan has a lot to look the other way about. But, what people following the story, including New York Times reporters who were on MSNBC last night, are clearly and simply explaining is that the criming comes first, then allegations about extortion afterwards.
Right.
So nobody knows whether he was being extorted. But even if he were, he did the crime first, and that's what he was being extorted about. So that's no excuse. That's no rationale. That's no mitigating, oh, well, I did the crime, but then I was extorted over it, therefore I'm innocent. That's not how it works.
I see. Yeah, right. Well, right. The extortion erases the crime. That's worse. That's the ultimate.
That's somebody else's crime, but that doesn't excuse yours.
Right.
Even if it's true, which of course we have no idea.
Yeah. Right. And of course, as others pointed out on Twitter yesterday, one of the key elements of successfully having the father wear a wire is not having the son say, he's wearing a wire.
Get him.
Usually not how it goes.
Yeah, it's unclear, says the story, exactly how Greenberg's criminal case is connected to the Gaetz investigation. Greenberg's lawyers did not immediately respond to messages in the Post early Tuesday, but it's clear the two men who posed for a photo together outside the White House in 2019, there was also a selfie with Roger Cohen included, by the way.
Roger Stone.
Or Roger Stone, rather.
Yeah. Roger
had
Cohen
ties
wasn't
to
even
Florida,
there.
where they both first gained power in the GOP around 2016. So the weird thing QAnon has been correct all along about child trafficking being part of the political establishment. What they got wrong is that it's Florida Republicans who do it.
Dang. And something pizza, something basement, So look at this.
Very weird.
Very weird. Plus, of course, the other day, for some reason, Matt Gaetz was tweeting the other day that he wanted when he has a scandal, he wants it to be called Gaetz Gate, which, I mean, there's a little backstory to it and how dumb it is. But, he may have, now he has a scandal, although Asha Rangappa here says, no, we should be calling it Pizza Gates, which is pretty fitting. I think that does the trick.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, of course, that's not the only legal news in the news. Not that I'm qualified to talk about it. I'm not a lawyer, and I don't play one on the internets. But, of course, yesterday was the George Floyd televised trial, which was at times riveting. I didn't watch the whole thing, of course. I did tune in for the firefighter lady late in the afternoon, who was illustrative of how the defense is doing this. Because the prosecution is basically lining up people who said, I saw this, they did this thing, it's bad. And the defense is trying to paint whoever saw it as, if you're black, angry, and if you're a white woman firefighter, incompetent, not clearly up to the level of doing your job the way it's called upon. And weren't you angry? Weren't you upset? You said things. You said things loudly. And aren't you an angry, upset person so that the jury understands where you're coming from? In the case of the black male, he said, "I stayed within my body." No, I mean, and in case of the white firefighter woman, she said what needed to be said is, if you're watching somebody get murdered, it's upsetting.
Yeah, well, that's true. I think that's understandable.
So basically, that's how that's going
on
the first day.
Yeah.
So all part of Infrastructure Week. I have a list here from Just Security entitled Litigation Tracker, Pending Criminal and Civil Cases Against Donald Trump.
Oh, my.
And so it's a whole list. Key takeaways: E. Jean Carroll, defamation and federal tort claims act. Summer Zervos defamation suit. Mary Trump fraud litigation.
Yeah.
Panama hotel fraud and tax litigation.
Right.
If the Capitol suing Trump's hotel management company for fraud.
Oh.
Doe versus the Trump Corporation class action against the Trump family and their business, alleging the Trumps used their brand to scam investors into paying for worthless business opportunities. D.C. civil suit over misuse of 2017 inauguration funds. Benny Thompson incitement suit for January 6th Capitol attack.
Okay.
Eric Swalwell incitement suit for January 6th riots. Capitol Police suit for January 6th riots. That's a new one.
Yes.
2 Capitol Police officers, both on duty, sued Donald Trump for injuries they sustained while protecting the Capitol. Both allege the rioters physically attacked them with fist chemical spray and other weapons, and allege that the former president, by his incendiary words and conduct, directed the physical attack and emotional distress. NAACP's Legal Defense Fund voting rights case for post-election action. New York Attorney General civil investigation. Criminal investigations into Trump's finances. What is this, a 2-hour show? D.C. Attorney General incitement criminal investigation. Fulton County, Georgia criminal election influence investigation. And their updates, officials are reportedly expected to seek a grand jury subpoena the week of March 1st for documents and witnesses connected to this investigation. And on March 11th, a recording of a call between then-President Trump and the chief investigator of the Georgia Secretary of State's office, Francis Watson, was released by the Wall Street Journal. On the call, Trump urged Watson to look for fraud in mail-in ballots. And as of March 28th, there were reportedly 2 grand juries considering subpoenas. So that's what's going on the Trump front.
All right.
All of that didn't include the latest. The court voids Trump's campaign's non-disclosure agreement.
Right.
Pact signed by former Hispanic Outreach Director Jessica Denson is too broad and vague to enforce. That may open up some floodgates. So, all of that is going on, and that's a huge part of Infrastructure Week. So, Trump has his issues. And the reason that he's showing up at weddings unexpectedly to grab the microphone and rail about Joe Biden is basically he needs people to keep him in the news and send him money because his legal fees are mounting. And as they say in the trade, his legal exposure is mounting as well.
Yeah, that's become his favorite. It was always a favorite game of his to crash the weddings at Mar-a-Lago. But I guess that's now the substitute for social media because TMZ will air the video. And he gets his fantastic message out. You're a beautiful couple, but the election was stolen.
It sounds like the aging lounge singer in the velvet suit,
Yeah, pretty much. That's really kind of sinking pretty low. Well, what a long list of litigation he's involved in. That's nothing
I just thought it was
Trump.
worth reminding people there's a lot going on there. And the wheels of justice grind exceedingly slow.
I hope Trump gets caught in them.
Right. So that's what's going on the legal front. Now, there actually is Infrastructure Week.
Yes.
News from a source familiar with the Biden infrastructure proposal coming today. It'll include $2 trillion in spending over 8 years in line with the first phase of the Build Back Better plans. And it will be paid for by corporate tax hikes over 15 years.
Okay.
So,
why not more?
So the weird thing is Biden is proposing a huge infrastructure thing. Okay.
Sure.
News analysis, new era. Even as debt soars, Biden faces few spending constraints. This is part of his the Joe Biden VFD era.
Right.
There's New Deal, Fair Deal, and then the big effing deal. 40 years ago, as a second-term Senator Joe Biden from the LA Times voted for the tax cuts that allowed Reagan to declare an end to big government. Later in the 90s, Biden supported a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution. As president, Biden has charted a far different course, responding to a changed economic environment and a vastly altered public mood. Earlier this month, he signed into law a $1.9 trillion spending plan that includes historic expansions of federal social safety net. And on Wednesday, that's today, he plans to outline just over $2 trillion in spending on roads, bridges, transit, elder care, housing, and upgrades in the nation's drinking water and electric power systems. The first tranche of a long-term Build Back Better plan for investing in the nation's infrastructure and support for families that could cost more than $3 trillion over the next decade. From going to backing Reagan to FDR parallels a change in the electorate, says the story. And voters' concerns about scope of government and size of national debt haven't disappeared, but for now, that's not driving how people vote.
Okay.
And here's the weird thing. The Republicans have been dominated by fiscal conservatives and elite conservatives for years and decades. They've been totally routed politically, and the populists are taking over. And because the populists have no idea what they're doing, they still cling to Republican conservative orthodoxy. Therefore, they turn around and say, yes, but how will you pay for it? Well, it turns out Biden is paying for it.
Oh, wait, that's
and they're
true.
kind of flummoxed because they really don't know what to do. Because if you oppose the plan because you're not paying for it, the Biden administration says, well, we are. We're getting all sorts of crap from the left. Walt Krugman and other people keep saying we shouldn't be paying for it.
Right.
We really shouldn't be raising taxes except on the rich, in which case you should actually raise them more. It isn't good enough to balance it. You have to go beyond, So there's all sorts of cross pressures going on, and none of them are Republican orthodoxy. None of them. So if you just go with the populist side, this is a bill Trump would sign. If you just go with the Republican orthodoxy side, it is paid for. What's your complaint? So they really don't know what to do, and that dynamic is playing out. And so as the New York Times searches
Dems
for
in
their
disarray.
Dems in disarray, they can't even do infrastructure. They have to look to the Voting Rights Act for that.
All right. Well, this is this should be pretty interesting. And all right, when they said that, well, how are you going to pay for it? Well, here's how we pay for it. Well, don't use that to pay for things.
Right, exactly.
What are you, crazy?
From the story, President Obama, faced with the worst economic collapse since the Great Depression, proposed a stimulus plan in 2009 that was smaller than many of his economic advisors thought wise, in part because of concern that the public wouldn't support something larger. His pollster Joel Benison said in a recent interview.
Well,
Biden faces little of that pressure. Even the statutory caps that for the last decade have restrained spending are about to be a thing of the past. They expire on September 30th. A little process and procedure thing thrown in there. What David has taught me over the years is the tiny little process and procedure things actually have enormous consequences. And there's so many of them, you have to pay attention to all of them, and you can't.
Have a tracker.
It's good that other people bring them up and remind you of them.
Yeah, the spending caps. Gosh, I hadn't. Yeah, I mean, we've just sort of learned to live with them in the background, and we occasionally get reminded of them, but only when we try to do something. Oh, God.
Yeah, but don't worry, Republicans. They'll be renewed on September 31st. Promise.
Well, yeah.
You voted for it. That's what was in your bill.
You put 10 years on it.
Okay.
Oh, and you know what? I'm trying to remember the provenance of the spending caps exactly. But whenever you hear about something that was valid for 10 years, fiscal control, good for 10 years, that's expiring, you can bet that came from passage under reconciliation. You might lose, but very rarely. So,
right. At the same time, Republicans who used to act as a brake on Democratic spending have given up that role, says Elaine Kemark, Brookings Institution scholar and former Democratic policy advisor. We've had 3 Republican presidential terms, 2 of Bush and 1 of Trump, and in not one of them was there any concern about budget balancing.
Yes, right.
Right. So the capstone on the Republican Party switch came with the 2017 tax cut, which slashed federal revenue by $2 trillion over a 10-year period. Democrats are rightfully enraged by the tax cut. At the same time, Republicans have an ongoing frustration over Democrats' refusal to acknowledge the problems facing the government's huge old age entitlement programs, which Trump also declined to touch. So the thing is that, and somebody else had posted this, was a really interesting observation. There's no such thing as bipartisanship.
Oh.
Joe Manchin, to the contrary, you can't get Republicans to work with you. And Republicans can't get Democrats to go along with their nutty schemes. right? That's just the way it is. You agree? For right now.
Okay.
Yes?
Yes. I feel pressured.
Okay. Yeah, but do you? I mean, where's the agreement? Where's the common ground here?
It's hard to, I don't see much.
Right, or at least on fiscal issues.
Okay. Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Okay. So therefore,
it could happen.
If you can't have bipartisanship, the thing to do is everybody takes their turn. When Republicans have the trifecta, they pass whatever the hell they can and dare you to do anything about it. And that's what Democrats are doing now. They've got the trifecta, barely.
Right. Yeah.
But they're going to pass popular stuff. They're going to do popular things. How do we know they're popular? Well, polls tell us that. I mean, just changing subject slightly, satisfaction with U.S. vaccine rollout surges to 68%, says Gallup. Well over 100 million COVID-19 vaccine doses administered, the public satisfaction with the rollout has surged 24 percentage points.
That
in the last month
basically parallels the numbers of percentages of adults getting their vaccine. So
but
maybe
also,
that's it.
The popularity of the COVID Relief Act that Biden passed.
True.
Right. So the point is, Democrats have the trifecta. They're doing popular things, and the Voting Rights Act is on the table. And there's other things that need to be done, including immigration. They're going to do infrastructure. And you know what? It's going to be popular. The thing on the table is, are they going to split it into the nuts and bolts and airports and clean water and then do the social stuff in a second bill? Or are they going to do it in one lump? More on that after the break.
All right. Well, they're going to need another trillion to do it all in one lump. I think the numbers come in a little bit lower than expected. We'll see whether that's gaming the system or what after this. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning. I have good news to report. Many more listeners like you are making critical contributions that keep our show on the air. Makes good sense, of course, and patreon.com, patreon.com, makes it simple. Now you can make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for helping keep you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all of your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We continue pondering our infrastructure week / decade / whatever, however long this goes on. Still trying to nail down the provenance of the 10-year spending caps, but it's beginning to come back piece by piece. So it's something that would have been a 2010 situation, 2 years midterms of the first Obama administration, Tea Party screeching, yada yada, flipped the legislature, finding himself searching for grand bargain of some sort. Grand
bargain. Remember, grand bargain is capitalized.
Yeah, that's right. But I think that does put us in the middle of. I mean, I don't know if it necessarily traces directly from the same agreement that gave, but it's bringing back all sorts of memories of that time, the grand bargain, the fiscal cliff, the super committee. This sounds like it's all tied together. Somewhere in the back of my mind, all of this comes together. And
I'll just throw that around while you have a chance to look it up.
Okay.
So this is from changing subjects a little bit. We already mentioned the pleasure the American public is taking with the Biden administration. Matt Gaetz, no, I'm not talking about you. About how the COVID thing is going. From Ariel Edwards Levy, who used to be Huffington Post and now is working at 538, looks like. New from me, she says. When the first COVID-19 vaccine was authorized last December, a lot of Americans were on the fence about getting it. Since then, there's been a dramatic shift toward vaccine acceptance, but the remaining holdouts could be more stubborn. And there's, of course, a graph that comes along with this story. So let me give that to you by trying to click the right buttons to actually send stuff. There it is.
Okay, click.
For some reason, I clicked something on Skype that gave me all the smileys and emojis. That's not what I wanted. I wanted to send this to you. So Americans say they're likely to get vaccinated now, and the trend for yes, very likely has gone up sharply, and maybe somewhat likely has gone down. But for those who said no, not likely, really hasn't changed at all. So about a quarter of the public just doesn't want to get the vaccine. Mm-hmm. That's why that story that you originally mentioned, which I had in my queue, about trying to seek out Trump counties, because red counties are likely to have vaccination slots, so everybody will run to get them.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So here's the story from 538. More and more Americans say they'll get vaccinated, but it's still unclear just how many will. The average share who expressed little intention of getting vaccinated dipped only modest 5 points, while the undecideds fell an average of 18 points. Mm-hmm. If a politician or issue saw a similar rise over that period of time, it'd be reported defensively as a shocking surge of support. Not unexpected, but it's a mistake to think of the public as divided between a faction of enthusiastic vaccine advocates and a smaller block of equally adamant anti-vaccine crusaders.
Enthusiasms.
Right.
Many Americans who were undecided but potentially swayable, that group has increasingly made up their minds in favor of the vaccine.
Okay.
Right. So there's a lot going on there under the surface. It's like only a quarter.
Okay.
Who are holdouts.
Good. By the way, I understand that people are telling me that you have a smooth jazz accompaniment apparently going on, or not anymore, but underneath your.
Really?
I don't hear it. Right. No, it wasn't me either. But happening on the Netroots radio side, all taken care of now. Justice on the
it was
spot.
Justice. Okay.
Yeah,
I'd like to take credit for it. I hope you liked
it,
but it was just me playing in the background. Abby's on drums, and we have to stop them. Abby G. Right. So there's that going on.
Yeah. Plus jazz.
Now this morning, Pfizer BioNTech vaccine has announced as safe and effective in children as young as 12. Mm-hmm. So now there's going to be a move. There's already 16 and older who are eligible. In fact, in some states, that's already happening.
Yeah, that's right. I know.
Right?
I need to be in one states.
But going down to as young as 12, and then there's 6 to 12, and that's still being checked out. So the whole thing is that another game changer might, in fact, be that the vaccines become available before September so that the next school season goes a lot smoother.
Okay.
So that's all part of Infrastructure Week as well. Now, it doesn't go well everywhere. And, this is going to bring up another question I have after this.
Yes.
But here's a story in the Washington Post. Brazil is rocked by political turmoil as pandemic outlook darkens. Now, this is a place where they're really doing nothing. And Bolsonaro, the president, Jair Bolsonaro, is basically denying that it even exists. And he's just fired his defense minister and the foreign minister. Okay. And a lot of his 6 cabinet members are out. A lot of his military is resigning.
Oh.
And because they supported the defense minister. And the exits have sent political shockwaves across Latin America's largest country, precipitating the most politically uncertain moment of President Bolsonaro's 2-year-plus tenure. Brazil must now face what public health analysts say could be the darkest weeks of the pandemic, with a raft of new officials and an incoherent national strategy. There's mounting political desperation in the presidential palace. Health systems have collapsed. Some 2,600 people are dying of the coronavirus every day. And Brazilians are increasingly looking to blame the failures of the pandemic on Bolsonaro, who has never appeared more vulnerable. Earlier this month, the leader of the Congress implied the president may face impeachment.
Hey, all right.
So we'll see what happens there. But one of the things that's happened is a shift in the age, because Brazil is having a young population ICU crisis, which is just a reminder to us, as we try to hold on for another couple of months, a month and a half or so, that younger people are not immune to the virus. And the numbers may be that they don't get as sick as 65 plus, but they still get sick. They still wind up in ICUs. They still die. And so when you're trying to compare places, whether it's states, Florida versus New York, Connecticut, California, Michigan, whether you're trying to compare regions like the Northeast to the Southwest, whether you're trying to compare countries, there are so many confounding factors that make it really difficult to figure out what's going on. And everybody who says, I know why it's bad here, but it's not bad over there, really needs to be a little humble about this because there's so much we don't know. We know that there are variants. We're not checking them everywhere. We know that there are different policies about, for example, mask mandates. Kemp in Georgia, Governor Brian Kemp is getting rid of all of the mandates whatsoever and making Georgia completely open, even as virus surges there. But there's also the vaccines and people getting vaccinated. And then there's always the key thing that people forgot and don't talk about as much, which is the Trump era mandate that if you don't test, you don't know. So yes. Is Connecticut surging in terms of its per capita cases because we test a lot, or because it's surging because of per capita cases? What's going on in South Dakota? Are they testing? Are they testing in Georgia? If you're not testing, you're not going to know what's going on. That's true. How much of it is we're testing better, more, and how much of it is there's actually surges here? Connecticut caught between Massachusetts and New York, two other states that are surging. So we don't know that. And so when you look back and say, well, Ron DeSantis is a star and Kemp is a star because they had opposite policies and they're not doing any worse than anybody else. Well, how do we know? Are we testing?
Yeah. Well, that's the real problem with it. But I mean, it's a weird way. Trump isn't entirely wrong about that. You can convince the press that you've done a great job controlling the virus if you just simply don't report that anybody's got it, even if they do.
Yeah, it's similar to his border policies. Yeah. He doesn't let media in to the child detention centers. Mm-hmm. Only Biden lets people in, even that under duress. And so you could say, oh, well, look at these conditions under Biden. Well, what about conditions under Trump? Well, we didn't see it. We didn't send film crews that got successfully into these places, so we don't really know. But we do know now because now we're getting in. So let's talk about what Biden is doing.
That can happen. There were people from when monitoring cases around the world. As I check in on the numbers each day, I occasionally would hear from people from these tiny little countries who are very upset that I'm from Andorra, and the reason we have the most cases in the world is everyone in the country has been tested 6 times. Oh. Well, okay. And so, I mean, it really does lead to
it's just a reminder. It's complicated. And so don't make simplistic assumptions that you know what's going on when, in fact, you don't. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, fair enough. That's a whole half the country of Andorra texted me.
Yeah.
Not hard to do, but...
Well, just don't get the Icelanders mad. That's all.
Well...
They'll send a volcano to your...
but nice they
don't send horses' heads. They just... You wake up and there's a volcano in
That's
your
right.
head.
Well, you're not allowed to export the horses from Iceland. That's why they won't do it. Heads or any part of them.
Even more importantly, you can export them, but you can't import them.
Right, they can't
if
come
you leave,
back.
You can't get them back.
Right. That's it. Even if it's just the head.
Yeah. So, again, Brazil is a cautionary tale on how to do it badly.
Right.
So, yes.
If Brazil impeaches their president, we don't. That's crazy.
The political elites for not supporting good science. But at the same time, variants, public action, vaccines, and how much you test are all going to go in the mix of how many cases you actually have. That's why, up until now, people who are following this said, well, forget about cases. They don't tell you that much. Look instead at the number of hospitalizations and the number of deaths, because that's more pure. Maybe you don't test, but if you get sick, you wind up in the hospital, so count that. But the thing is, as the burden of disease shifts to younger patients, they may not wind up in hospital as much. They may not wind up dying as much. That doesn't mean things are getting better. The virus may be exploding in that population, with a lot of people sick at home and long COVID issues and so on and so forth. So, you know, as you decouple, we talked about this on the show at one point in the recent past.
Not you, Matt.
As you decouple the cases from deaths and hospitalizations, it becomes harder and harder to track. And so that's one of the dilemmas that the administration is going to have and CDC is going to have and try to figure out what's actually going on.
All right. Less decoupling.
Yep. So all of that's true. And then from that Gallup piece, reports of taking COVID mitigation actions by vaccination status. There are some things people may do because of their concern about the coronavirus. For each one of the following, please indicate if this is something you have done, are considering doing, or have not considered in the past week. If you're fully vaccinated, 54% are still avoiding going to public places.
All right. Fair. Good.
If you don't plan to get vaccinated, only 22% are avoiding it.
Oh. Well, okay. So
right?
The most reckless.
If you're fully vaccinated, 70% are still avoiding going to events with large crowds, and only 35% of those who don't plan to be vaccinated. Same thing with travel, same thing with the small gatherings of people. The point is that vaccination isn't automatic. You'd think it would be the opposite. I'm fully vaccinated. Right. I can do everything. I'm not vaccinated. I won't do anything. It's actually the opposite.
Yes.
I'm fully vaccinated. People. I'm still being careful because I'm looking at those numbers and they're rising. I'm not vaccinated. I don't plan to, and I'm going to do whatever the hell I want. Right. You can't tell me freedom.
Right, right. And some of that is some of that may be, just braggadocio. They're not doing anything. But they want to.
Well,
there's nothing happening where they live.
Sturgis.
Yeah, I guess so. That doesn't come until August. But I think, then just read that there's another motorcycle rally coming up somewhere, and it might be like New Orleans or something too, which really not a great place to bring that to. They never really recovered from the first round of Mardi Gras during COVID. And all right, well, yeah, it figures that the most reckless people will refuse the vaccine, insist they're going to do everything and anything and everything they want to, whether they really do it or not. We don't find out until they leave the disease behind. Is it among their local friends, or have they brought it somewhere else and left it behind?
So the next thing that's going to lead to,
yes,
is medical passports, vaccine passports.
Right, the Holocaust, exactly.
Yeah, because some libertarian compared that to the Holocaust because I don't know why. Yeah,
no, it's totally the same thing. So medical passports, and again, these are things that will allow you
which exist, by the way. Yellow fever, you need to have a vaccine to go to certain places, and you basically get a vaccine passport. This is not new to the world. And the other side of the coin, if you say, well, this is America, we don't do that. Freedom,
Yes, we do.
First and 27th Amendments. There's a rule, even in places like Florida, that you have to get vaccinated to go to school.
Yes.
It's not a rule, it's a law.
Okay. I mean.
So, are you going to rescind those? And if you don't, what's the difference?
No. I don't know. Nothing. Hypocrisy is, what can you do? Things that people are used to, they forget they're actually in place. Things that are novel, like this coronavirus. Suddenly getting a vaccine passport for that is out of the question. And the passport, I mean, it may just end up, I don't even know if it's going to be a separate thing, but everyone I know who's been vaccinated, they get the little cards, and it says what date you were vaccinated, and I don't know what they think the purpose of the card is once you get your
It's to remind
vaccine.
You.
I guess, but people are now carrying it around
nobody else
saying...
is supposed to see. It's like, oh my God, you looked at my driver's license, now I have to kill you. What's going on here?
I don't know. I'm not really certain what people thought that was all about, or whether that's supposed to be what it's going to end up being, the passport.
In fact, on Twitter, somebody posted a picture of their vaccination card that you get when you go, which is really just designed to tell you which one you got and when you got it. And it's very helpful when you go for your second shot to know, you got Pfizer, we're going to give you Pfizer. Okay. And you're in the right time frame here.
Yeah, that's right.
Your software says so, but this is a double check, right? So somebody posted
paper trail.
And everybody on Twitter started yelling at him. Oh, you're showing personal information. You shouldn't do that. It's really bad advice, said all the pseudo-lawyers and libertarians. You shouldn't show. Why? What's on here that's not public?
I don't know. How to spell Pfizer?
Are you saying that you're going to take my lot number and use it against me somehow? I'm not figuring. What are you saying here?
I don't know. I feel like certainly there's some hacker somewhere who could make something out of this, but I haven't seen it happen yet.
Well, probably
that
guy in Florida who's friends with Matt Gaetz.
Yeah, right. Oh, yeah. He'll now he I'm sure was planning on making a fortune in forged vaccine passports. That seems to be his game. So maybe putting them on the internet gives him a template to print them from. That's better. Although he might be in jail right now. I don't know. I forget what his current status is. But yeah, I don't know. I guess there's no serious issue with it. Although I did see that in our vaccination center, they did have signs up that said, please don't take and share on social media vaccine selfies in here. And I wasn't exactly sure why that was, but I think it might have to do with people in the background. But I don't know. That's not the same thing. I think it's okay to show your vaccine card. I mean, generally speaking, don't post anything that has any information on it if it doesn't also help do anything.
A little paranoid, but don't forget, the QAnon people will finish where we started. They were right about sex trafficking among politicians.
I guess so.
So these conspiracy theories always have something behind them, don't they?
There's usually a kernel of truth there. And there's also, of course, the parallel theory of whatever spreads into Republican circles is absolutely, forget QAnon for a second, but when Republicans start accusing people of something, and in this case it's picking up on the QAnon accusations, it's usually something that they are already doing, which is why they think everybody else must also be doing it. So there's definitely two parallel tracks for explaining why different sets of wackos, one who's just out of their mind and the other just are actively interested in lying about their political enemies, but why both would have chosen sex trafficking with minors, I guess it comes from the same thing. One
minor.
Group,
are you talking West Virginia, Appalachia?
Yes, right. It's what the miners wanted. Trump was very responsive to the miners, so. You can see why. And can you believe in 10 years when the spending caps expire, he'll be dating them?
Right.
We didn't even know.
Yeah, but not now. They're too young. Mm-hmm. They're only 10. But, wait till they're 14.
Yes.
So that's the story. That's all I got. I'm going to go off the air before the garbage truck comes and Abby goes nuts.
You want to select some music?
Abby G is going to be on drums again in just a few moments. But that's really the roundup with a whole bunch of stuff. It's not the chaos, but it sure is a little lightning round, this, that, and everything else.
Yes.
So thanks so much for listening, folks. Support David. Ignore me. Listen to the rest of the show if you don't like what I'm saying. But I just, David and I are old friends, and I just like interrupting him. I've been doing it for like 15 years.
And yeah, I don't even know if it counts as interrupting if you go on for 15 years. Maybe it was me interrupting you the whole time.
What have we been talking about? Spending caps and infrastructure week. All of that time.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing else.
It's true. And we have to get we should check in on that a little bit. We'll talk a little bit about it more, I'm sure, tomorrow. I wasn't anticipating the release of the plan this week. I thought it would come next week. But I guess not. They do it ahead of the return of Congress to Washington, and this way we can talk it up and I guess they can hit the ground running. All right. Well, it sounds like things are erupting into activity there. Yep. The garbage truck must be there.
I'll see you tomorrow. We'll talk. We'll at least know what's going on because he'll be out there.
Yeah.
And he'll come and he'll talk. He'll release his infrastructure people, and then everybody will shout questions on him about what's going on at the border and what's going on with Matt Gaetz. And he's going to say, well, Jim Jordan is ignoring it, so I guess I can too.
Yeah. How long has it been since Matt Gaetz had a live press conference?
I don't know, but he was on live on Tucker Carlson last night for the Tucker Talk, so that counts.
That's a one-on-one. I want to see a solo press conference and reasons. And we might as well start the counter.
By the way, Carlson was not happy with it. He just said, this is really weird. I've never had such a weird interview in my entire life.
Well, it doesn't pay for him
that's not
to
exactly support.
Tied up as why be a supporter, though? I mean, there's nothing Matt Gaetz can do for him, so Yeah, I would run the other direction. And then, of course, there's some possibility that maybe he was down in Florida and hung out with Matt Gaetz at some point and doesn't want anyone to know that.
Well, actually, since you brought that up,
this.
Matt Gaetz brought up a 20-year-old accusation against Tucker Carlson as having a sex scandal.
Oh, yeah?
And Carlson said, "What are you talking about? No, don't you remember? People said that you had sex with underage people, too." And Carlson said, "That was some 20-year-old story from some crazy guy that I never met. Why are you bringing that up?"
Yeah. What would you do that for, Matt? Didn't you want him on your side? I thought. Oh, well.
Yeah, I didn't bring you on my show so you could do that.
That's funny.
I brought you on my show so you could defend yourself. Well, this is defending myself. Everybody does it. It's normal.
Now we're getting somewhere. Okay. Now I understand what he was trying to do. Well, you're an idiot for putting him on your show, Tucker.
Well, actually, Tucker.
Yeah, that's really something. Wow. Okay. Very bold. Good
That's
defense.
a bold move, Cotton. We'll see if it works.
That's amazing. Well, I do believe that there's some kernel of truth to that. Republicans really just think everybody is doing the horrible things that they're doing. And just because, it's been my experience that I do it. So I'm a normal guy, except he's really not. And he just doesn't know it yet. What does Nestor have to say about all this? Got to get him on the air. All right. Very good. Thank you.
Take care, and I'll talk to you tomorrow with, we know what's going on stuff.
Maybe. We'll know what the newspaper thinks is going on anyway. All right. So let's round it up here. What kind of comments have we had over the past hour or so? Well, one, relevant to the actual stories going on, Monica pointing out here that, the vaccine card does have the vaccine lot number. And the reason it's on there, of course, is that it's just for your own information and for tracking information. If something goes wrong or you have side effects or somebody suspects that there's something, I guess, wrong with the vaccine, then they can check in with other people who got vaccines from the same lot and see if there was something wrong with the production of the vaccine or whether it was just you or what have you. But that's true. But I guess Greg answering right now, it's not a personal security issue to show something like that. I can't even come up with an idea of what somebody would do if they got a hold of the lot number. I mean, I guess you could, if you were determined to do something to somebody and all the information you had was somebody's lot number, I suppose if you really wanted to do something, you could, you could fake up some sort of announcement that there were terrible side effects from a certain lot of the vaccine and put it out as a fake press release and see if it somehow filters down to the person that you're targeting. And then they would be worried about that, but then they wouldn't actually have the side effects. They would just simply worry about them. And I don't know. I guess there's not too much you could do in terms of ruining someone's life by getting a hold of their vaccine card. Usually with enough time, I can think of something you can do to pull something over on somebody, but with varying degrees of success and impact, I suppose. The rest of the comments that we had, of course, were about the fantastic music that was underneath our return from the break, variously described as light or smooth jazz and light salsa by many of you. And then the interesting comment that someone put out that said, it's Linda Chapman said that on her headphones, the music was only on the left channel and Greg was on both the left and right channels. So it was an interesting mix. Maybe this will help us track down exactly what it was. It's a very weird thing. And I think Justice was caught by surprise by it because it's ordinarily programmed for a hard start and stop, and it's automatic, and so it wasn't something he was monitoring. And so now I guess I'll have to track down what was it that changed such that the music continued after the break ended. And I don't know whether it'll help track anything down if we find out the fact that the music was only on the left channel or something, but who knows. What lot number vaccine did the musician who's responsible for the recording get, and then we'll hack into their home studios because people are performing this live, by the way. I don't know if you know that. It was a vast infrastructure. We employ millions in bringing you the production of this show. All right, well, we'll see what we can find out about it. Now back into the news. Let's see. First of all, shall we double back on this? Because I did see somebody else. Let's see, who was it? I'm looking back in the comments here. Here we go. Passing on the story, Absinthe, passing on the story of people seeking out, what shall we call them? Low vaccine interest areas, for whatever reason, to find their free dosage if the appointments around them are all booked. Just so we have some real background in something that somebody at a publication that can actually get sued had to say about it. That's how you know they're trying their best to sort of kind of get the story straight. It was the Daily Beast, right? Larison Campbell reporting for them. Vaccine hunters target Trump counties for easy appointments. Of course, I now realize we're up against our top of the hour break, so we can chat our way through the next minute or so and then continue with the story on the other side. It says here, by way of subheader to the piece here, for city residents with a car and time for a road trip, which is, of course, another way of saying privileged folks, essentially. A disturbing disparity can quickly become an opportunity. And, I mean, I guess depending on what city you're talking about, if you're talking about Wall Street types, turning every crisis into an opportunity, it makes it sound kind of gross. There's a lot of baggage that goes along with it. I know, for instance, many people who will seek out the vaccine when there's none available in their area feel some sort of shame at doing it because they feel like maybe I'm taking it from someone who needed it. But all right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Where we left off, I just ran out of time prior to the break. Yeah, a lot of vaccine shame and shaming going on with people who sometimes do things like this. And I'm not certain it's entirely fair. And also, I think, just scientifically speaking, look, if a vaccine that's in an arm is better than a vaccine that's not, certainly, even absent the particular problem that this vaccine has with preservation and the fact that if you open a vial and give some people their doses as planned and you have some doses left over and you've got to throw them out at the end of the day if no one takes them, even if that weren't the case, still a vaccine that's in an arm is doing more work and doing better things than a vaccine that isn't. Even if you could save it for the next day, I guess I've kind of convinced myself, not that I didn't go out of turn. I was apparently allowed to take my shot and got it. But, some others who are more active in seeking out vaccines elsewhere have met a lot of resistance, or whether it's something they generated in their own head or other people told them. But again, one more person running around immunized is less chance of others elsewhere and wherever they travel to, others in various places getting sick from the disease. It just doesn't make a great deal of sense to me to worry too much about individuals snapping up vaccines, especially where there are others who have the opportunity who pass on it. It just doesn't make any sense. And the faster a greater percentage of the population is vaccinated, if others, this is an interesting possibility too, if people in vaccine hesitant counties begin to see that their appointments are being snapped up, that might actually spur, there's research to suggest that might actually spur them to do the same. They won't know who is taking these appointments. Of course, it depends on them actually looking to see whether or not their appointments are available in the first place. And there will be those who are so vaccine resistant that they're not even going to look. But then there will be others who are vaccine curious but also hesitant about things, and they'll look and see. And if they see that there's no real response to the fact that there are 100 appointments available on this day, they won't feel motivated to try and think about getting an appointment for themselves. But if they begin to see that at the beginning of the day there were 100 appointments and now they're down to 12, maybe I better act soon to get in on this thing that everybody else is getting in on. I wonder if it might motivate some borderline hesitancy cases to change their minds. Where did I see this morning? Somebody was tweeting about a study being done. How can I find this? I don't remember who it was, but talking about I don't know what, like a sociology type study. There it is. I found it pretty quickly too, because I remembered one of the key elements of the study that they were talking about. And this is Juliet Kayyem, Harvard professor and CNN analyst, tweeting this morning, in crowd studies, the phenomenon of people parking cars close to one another in a huge open parking lot is attributed to a desire for social cohesion from the sense that the first parker has inside scoop. I don't know whether they meant that to be like an abbreviated version of has the inside scoop or whether that's, more streamlined language, but that means, hey, what have you got? I've got scoop, and in fact, it's inside scoop. Promising vaccination hesitancy data shows the same, so the connection is made here. Vaccinations beget vaccinations. This is, and it includes a thread from the Kaiser Family Foundation that suggests the same, and it makes some sense. I mean, at first I was thinking, well, the phenomenon of people parking cars close to one another in huge open lots, is it attributed to a desire for social cohesion from a sense that the first parker has the inside scoop, or is it people saying, I know where the entrance to this building is, and I'm going to park close to it? Yes, it would be easier to park in this other area of the parking lot where nobody's around and I don't have to worry about being perfectly between the lines, but usually people are essentially saying, well, I'll park here and then I'll have less of a walk to the door. I know there are a couple people who say walking is healthy and I'm going to park as far away as possible. On a nice day, you might as well enjoy the walk, but it's a walk in a parking lot. So I don't know how much they're really enjoying it, but I appreciate their optimism and cheerful outlook on life. But yeah, well, I mean, I guess here they're trying to be more careful about this thing. And I guess randomizing things somewhat, and I don't know whether they really conducted an actual study or not. But if you were watching people parking in a huge open parking lot, if you parked the car farther away from the actual entrance and then people started parking around them, you might find that was the case. Anyway, the real question is, will it work with vaccines? And they seem to think so. I wonder what the Kaiser Foundation thread has to say about it. This is where, though, I happened to see the number when Greg mentioned something. What did he say? About 68% approval of the vaccine rollout now. It occurred to me how close that was to this fact. The Kaiser Family Foundation thread begins with this information. 61% of adults have either gotten at least one dose of COVID vaccine or want to do so ASAP, as the wait and see group continues to shrink. And it struck me that how interesting. Well, if 68% approve of the rollout and 61% of adults have either gotten at least a first dose or are scheduled to do so or want to do so, that makes some sense. Of course, 68% approve of the rollout because 61 to 68% of people have said, great, I love the fact that it's rolling out and I've gotten an appointment for at least one shot, or I'm about to, and that makes me happy, and I therefore approve of how things are going. What does the rest of this KFF thread have to say? 61% of adults have either gotten one dose or want to do so ASAP, blah, blah, blah. The wait and see group continues to shrink. That might be, again, people saying, look, People are parking around the entrance to this vaccination clinic. I should too. Happens to point out here, black adults saw the biggest jump since February with a plus 14-point swing. And then from there, the latest vaccine monitor report. Any more things to extract from this? Oh, maybe just the data itself. Anyway, in case you were wondering, 1 in 5 adults are more reluctant, including 7% who would get vaccinated, quote, only if required, and 13%, though, saying definitely not. Those most likely to say definitely not include Republicans, 29%, and white evangelical Christians, 28%. And what a odd overlap that is. Gee whiz. About 29% Republicans, 28% white evangelical Christians. I suggest they may be the same people. But, okay. Among those who have not yet been vaccinated, 3 in 10 are unsure if they're eligible yet. And that's an issue. Hispanic adults, 45%, and people with lower incomes, 37%, are among those more likely to be uncertain. We examined vaccine access information and incentives, and they charted all out here. Interesting. So, anyway, I think maybe that's the aim of the states who are just throwing it open now, blanket eligibility for everyone over 16, so that will eliminate whatever doubt there is left about who is and isn't eligible. Because it seems like they went from the 1A group of frontline medical workers and the elderly to the 1B group, at least that's what they were calling it in our area, which was, adults, I forget what the age group they put, like 45, but adults with various, or all adults, regardless of age, with varying medical exceptions of sorts, of people who had higher risk factors, right? Respiratory disease, asthma, etc., diabetes, overweight, heart conditions, whatever else were complicating factors. And people began, if you were really on top of it and were waiting, anxiously to get the vaccine, and you were researching, you would say, well, I have that, or could have that, or should ask my doctor about that, and you jump on it. Others who aren't looking, see only, well, let's see, I heard on the news that they were vaccinating elderly people, and I'm not over 75, so that's not me. And by that point, they lose interest. But if you, or I heard that it was available to people younger than 75 if you have one of these factors, and I'm not, paying attention to the news or my health, so I really don't know. Whereas, all right, look, everybody over 16, there was supposed to be a 1C, I guess, and I don't know whether they went to 1D or to 2 at that point, but I figured they would just keep lowering the age and expanding it to other exceptions, etc., but that became too complicated. And with the supply finally coming online, they finally just said, throw it, I guess, open to 16 plus, and that ought to end the confusion for people who aren't sure if they're eligible or not, and I guess that's what you really want. So, all right, interesting. The Daily Beast article about this, do we want to go through it all the way? We'll find out a little bit about what's happening factually on the ground, because, as I said earlier, I assume the Daily Beast didn't want to get sued about anything. As soon as Ohio opened up its coronavirus vaccine eligibility to residents over 70, Jennifer Salzano threw herself into finding an appointment for her mom, who's 72 and has heart disease and diabetes. For the next few days, Salzano was hunched over her phone, scouring dozens of Kroger, CVS, and Walgreens sites for any appointment near her mom's home in Columbus, the state capital. It was at midnight, when a slew of new appointment times would get released, she'd dash to the family computer and try again. The result was always the same, no availability. I was kind of like, this is never going to happen, Salzano told the Daily Beast, but then her dad suggested she might have better luck if she looked in the parts of Ohio where denial about COVID's risks was high and demand for vaccines was low. So I just Googled Trump landslides in Ohio. Then I looked at the nearest county and the biggest city in that county, and I found an appointment, Salzano told the Daily Beast. The whole thing took me 3 minutes, she added. 3 months after the Pfizer and Moderna shots began rolling off the trucks in the U.S., polls show that aversion to the new coronavirus vaccines remains significantly higher among Trump supporters and Republicans than among Democrats and Biden supporters. This, public health experts say, means a new kind of disparity in the country's vaccine rollout, with far more jabs available in the country's conservative districts than in its progressive ones, the latter being where many of the people of color at high coronavirus risk reside. I see. All right, still, for city residents with a car and time for a road trip, this disparity can quickly become an opportunity. You see what the opportunity is right before you. Let's see. So I was thinking back to earlier in the show when I was mentioning Benji Sarlin was saying, well, is this a chicken and egg thing? Like, is it low population density that has left so many appointments available? And others were pointing out, well, probably not, because if they're doing any thinking at all, I mean, if there's any fairness to the distribution of the vaccine at all, and I think it's been the aim, certainly of the Biden administration, that there be some fairness involved, even if the Trump administration didn't concentrate on that at all or actively avoided it. But you would think, be distributing the vaccine in some proportion to population. You wouldn't just say, well, 1 million doses for every county, because there's some counties that have like 3 people in them and others that have twice that many or more. So if there's any assumption that the number of vaccine doses that you get bears some relation to the size of your population, then population density ought not to have much to do with it. A low population county will get presumably a lower number of doses. If that number of doses still isn't being taken, that would be an indication of additional hesitancy above and beyond the average hesitancy for the country. And, of course, that will begin to get distorted by people snapping up those available appointments. So probably at some point we'll begin to mask that effect. But luckily we've measured it already. So we took the snapshot before it disappeared. So let's see. Anyway, as we said, for city residents with a car and time for a road trip, this can become an opportunity. There are any number of rural counties here in Tennessee where they have vaccines available. Any adult 18 and up in the state can come in who wants it. Dr. William Schaffner, a professor of preventive medicine and infectious disease at Vanderbilt University, told the Daily Beast, and we're seeing this availability throughout these rural, more conservative areas. That appointment that Salzano found for her mom was in Licking County, unless they have some weird pronunciation like it's Liking County or something like that, but it's pronounced Licking County, which, Matt Gaetz, don't get excited. Don't be all ready to move from Florida to Ohio just because of Licking County. Anyway, it's directly east of Columbus, in case you are thinking of relocating. But by the way, if you are, I just wanted to alert the sex offender network in the county that you are on the way. More than 63% of the Licking electorate, boy oh boy, I hope that's the right pronunciation. Actually, you know what? I hope it isn't. I didn't want to find out about Dr. Amy Action being Dr. Amy Acton. I don't want to know whether Licking County isn't pronounced that way. I really do know. I would feel foolish, but it is a lot of fun to do it this way. Anyway, more than 63% of that county's electorate had voted for former President Donald Trump. In Franklin County, the Democratic stronghold that includes Columbus, only 34% of voters chose to re-elect the former president, and they're idiots. When Salzano's aunt became eligible, or some like to say aunt, became eligible 2 weeks later, she also helped find her an appointment in the same county, Licking. And once she became eligible herself, Salzano, who lives in deep blue Chicago, found an appointment that same week in bright red Grundy County, Illinois, which is a relief. I was beginning to dread what sexually suggestive name of what county in Illinois would she have gone to. Grundy, I don't know, unless we want to make up some sort of, it could be a euphemism for something. I'll check Urban Dictionary, and I'm sure I'll be disgusted when I find out. Anyway, in Grundy County, Illinois, Trump took 62% of the vote and killed them by making them vaccine hesitant. Salzano is far from the only resident of Blue America to figure out that a coveted vaccine slot is not equally coveted in every corner of her state. My county, which is trending very, very blue these days, from red a decade ago when we had the spending caps in place. But I had no trouble getting an appointment. They just centralized the distribution very well. Of course, we were on top of things, and we were ready to pounce and look for an appointment as soon as we became eligible. So maybe it just worked out that way. For the first 2 days after Nebraska opened up vaccine eligibility to adults over 18, 34-year-old Lincoln resident Megan Timperley sat at her computer with tabs open for the sites of the nearby Walmart and Hy-Vee pharmacies, hitting reload. Finally, a cynical and older veteran I played Dungeons and Dragons with, this is really going far afield, as she put it, suggested she look at maps of voting trends and book accordingly. It's all very interesting that this is happening. So, I guess this goes on for some time, and perhaps we're not going to learn a great deal more except hear a lot more anecdotes. But it's really been interesting to see people doing it and doing things, taking a scientific approach to things, and it makes a certain amount of sense, even if it doesn't necessarily describe everyone in every one of these counties. The broad strokes seem to work out pretty well. It's an interesting thing to do. Reminds me a little bit of when I found out that family vacation spot, a favorite of ours, which down around me is the natural favorite for a lot of people, going to the Outer Banks of North Carolina for a spring vacation and for summer vacation, but that it was a spring vacation for us, although at the time that it became popular with my family was chiefly based in New Jersey, so it was a little bit further afield to go for a trip, but I found out that there was a scientific basis for it, which was that in the early-ish spring, although this ended up being just before Memorial Day, but this was the science behind choosing the Outer Banks, that they wanted to go for an early vacation, and they wanted to go, they chose the week before Memorial Day because vacation home rentals in the Outer Banks, the rates jump for the summer from the period of Memorial Day through Labor Day. The rates are much higher. So the objective was, we'll rent a house just before the rates go up, as late as possible to give give us the opportunity to get warmer temperatures in the air and in the ocean. So renting the week before Memorial Day. And why the Outer Banks? And that was chosen, of course, because it's apparently the northernmost, typically speaking, the northernmost point of the Gulf Stream along the Atlantic coast. And the Gulf Stream sort of heads out east into the middle of the Atlantic Ocean from that point. So it's the warmest water you can get. It's the closest source of Gulf Stream warmed water you can find, as late as you can wait before the rates go up on the rentals. It impressed me in its scientific precision. We no longer do this, but I thought that was a clever way of picking your annual vacation time and spot, and it really impressed me. And I guess that's why I'm so impressed with the idea of using voting demographics to find yourself a hard-to-find vaccine appointment. So anyway, keep it up, and it helps use up those vaccine allotments. And if it's anything like the way the rest of the government works, the fact that you're using up the vaccine allotment in these vaccine-hesitant areas means perhaps that as people become less hesitant and see more cars in the parking lot or whatever it is that changes their minds, and then they begin to contact their county about getting a vaccine too, and they say, well, we're running low on supplies, but more is coming because the way government budgeting works, you use it or lose it, right? You used up your allocations, but you still claim to have demand, they'll send you more. So maybe it all works out in the end, and you needn't feel guilty about doing it. Might be the best thing that you can do to encourage hesitant residents of your state to change their minds and get in on the action. Okay, let's see. So the original, by the way, I'll share with you the original anecdote that I had seen that I ended up sharing with Benji Sarlin, just to say, when he was saying, it's not clear to me that people are actually looking for voting trends as a way of targeting things, but rather low density nearby counties. It was a tweet from Climate Kristen, whose name apparently Kristen Hogue, a PhD student, self-identified PhD student in cultural studies at UC Davis, who happened to have a very popular tweet from March 24th saying, recently my doctor told me to find a vaccine appointment ASAP, but there were none in my area. I told her this and she said, go to a political map and find the reddest zip code near me. And it was there that I found 22 open appointments at a Walgreens today and received my first vaccine shot. That's a big wow for her, okay? And that widely circulated. It's been retweeted some 13,500 times with 65.4 thousand likes. So that was my first exposure to that particular anecdote. And it was very explicit about looking for red areas. That was the whole point of it. All right, let's double back and take a look at some of the other things that I had set aside. Of course, it would be fun to go back. There's not much more news about Matt Gaetz, and if you were like me, you couldn't help but dive in and read one of these stories before the show started just to get some detail on what was going on here. But the spin afterwards has become just as much a fun part of the story as anything else. There was the Washington Post's story on the situation got to the part of the story that was still a bit of a mystery to me. I did happen to see, New York Times got the early splash with their headline, Matt Gaetz is said to face Justice Department inquiry over sex with an underage girl. That'll get some eyes. And that was a shocking enough sort of story and headline. But the Washington Post was the one that I think did the best job in filling in the blanks about what about this Joel Greenberg guy. Greg told us a little bit about him. How is it that they're connected? How is it that the investigation into him led to an investigation into Gaetz? And maybe we'll save that for the other side because we're going to hit our break. But this will help fill in the blanks for you about who is Greenberg and how come they're associated and what the hell's wrong with this guy. This guy seems like a true psychopath in a way. Just the way he dove into politics and immediately just went straight to the biggest corruption he possibly could think of. I guess that he possibly thought he could get away with. And he was wrong about that because he hasn't gotten away with it. And no mystery once you figure out what a scumbag he is alleged to be, why he ended up connecting with Matt Gaetz and Roger Stone. And who knows who else down there in Florida. It's a very weird story. All right, let's see. How about we sneak in an item or two before our music and our exit from the show. Yes, I have a note here somewhere. And have I written it down? Yes, said I wanted to stay current with the our donors, our very generous donors who help sustain the show here. And I caught up the other day, and then we've had another one come in, so I thought I would take a moment out and say thanks to Ed Coble for joining the ranks of those who are supporting the show. Brand new, although unclear whether you go by Ed or your full name of Edgar. I see the associated email address just goes with Ed, but either way, I don't mean to offend you, but thanks very much for joining us and signing on as a sponsor. We appreciate it. And actually, in checking on the latest from Patreon, I see that there's another one just since last night editing their pledge. So we'll begin to, if we can stay current, then we can thank people who are boosting their pledges as well. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show. I think I kind of screwed up the outro and maybe even talked straight into the break. In fumbling around to try and find the information, I may have not even gotten the thank you properly on the air. So what we were trying to do, you see, was to thank Ed Coble for joining the ranks of the supporters of the show on Patreon, and also to use the opportunity of staying somewhat current to thank people who actually have increased their pledges and presumably correctly got their thank you on the air the first time around. But Stephen Brown joining the ranks of those who have boosted their pledge, and we appreciate everyone. Look, we appreciate it whether you're supporting the show or not. We appreciate the fact that you're around to boost our numbers and download the show, and we hope, you can evangelize for the show. It doesn't make you a white evangelical or any color evangelical just because you're doing that, but you're evangelizing for the good stuff, not the crazy stuff necessarily. And then of course there are the very many liberal evangelicals that always tend to get squeezed out in focusing on evangelicals, and we appreciate those folks as well, who are also evangelizing the good stuff, like, that your religion preaches maybe being nice to people and not accumulating wealth and pretending that God was awarding it to you because he really appreciated the way you stabbed others in the back. It would be nice for all of us if that would supplant what comes to mind when you say evangelical right up front. So, okay. Didn't mean to get into that aspect of the language, but thanks to everybody, and maybe we should just keep it simple for next time, and then we won't screw up things like the intro and outro from the show. I wonder if I can go back and fix that in post, and then make no sense out of then it will seem like the whole thing was for nothing. Anyway, let's pay attention to the stories we wanted to tell people instead. That's probably the most important part. I told you that the Washington Post piece connecting Joel Greenberg and Matt Gaetz was somewhat informative on this, and perhaps we should put time into that one. Ex-GOP official Joel Greenberg flaunted ties to Matt Gaetz. Then he was charged with child sex trafficking. That's just a chronological recitation of what happened, not a cause and effect thing. Although, if it was cause and effect, that would be interesting. Maybe that would end the career of Matt Gaetz. Everyone is afraid to be associated with him because they think they'll be charged with child sex trafficking. Well, how do you get yourself charged with that? What the hell's going on here? As poor as we all thought Matt Gaetz' judgment to be, I don't know if we thought it ran to that. But he was always a little bit questionable in terms of his relationships, even with, you remember the old Nestor story and the strange, but, for another person, maybe plausible explanation of that relationship, but not so much for him. But, apparently he's dated quite a few women significantly younger than him, and he's not that old. So he seems like, well, he's got that proclivity, and I don't know. As long as you keep things legal, I guess it's not an issue. Anyway, Kate Shepard, reporting for the Washington Post, describes the Joel Greenberg angle here. Until last year, Joel Greenberg was an ascendant political player in Seminole County, Florida, where he unseated a longtime incumbent in the race for county tax collector, won a political battle to allow his deputies to carry guns on the job, and flaunted his connections to prominent Republicans with close ties to President Donald Trump, including Representative Matt Gaetz and Roger Stone. But last June, his reputation fell apart in spectacular fashion when federal investigators arrested him on stalking and child sex trafficking charges, prompting his resignation. One of the rare Republican resignations under fire for things like this. On Tuesday, the case against Greenberg, 36, gained national prominence after the New York Times reported that it had also sparked a separate criminal investigation into allegations that Gaetz had a sexual relationship with a teenage girl. The Justice Department is investigating allegations that Gaetz had a sexual relationship with a 17-year-old girl and paid for her to travel across state lines, the Washington Post reported on Tuesday. Gaetz confirmed the inquiry in an interview with Axios, but has said the allegations are an attempt to extort his family. The FBI is separately investigating the extortion claim, the Post reported. And we could take a look at that article just to see if there's any real detail about what's going on over there. It's unclear exactly how Greenberg's criminal case is connected to the Gaetz investigation. Greenberg's lawyers did not immediately respond to messages from the Post early Tuesday, but it is clear that the two men who posed for a photo together outside the White House in 2019 had ties in Florida, where both first gained power in the GOP around 2016. This, of course, you heard from Greg earlier, but the further details about Greenberg are still to come. Greenberg's entire stint in office was tumultuous, with both high-profile political battles and repeated scandals marring his tenure in Seminole County in central Florida near Orlando. And it's all ironic, as the article explains, because he runs to displace a longtime Republican incumbent on the charge that this person is scandal-marred and corrupt. In 2016, Greenberg, who owned an Orlando-based advertising company before running for office, rose to local prominence by defeating a 3-decade incumbent in the Republican primary for Seminole County tax collector. His opponent had been embroiled in controversy over questionable but legal real estate practices that he and his family members had engaged in, the Orlando Sentinel reported at the time. People are sick of crony capitalism and with politicians using their offices for political gain, Greenberg said after winning the primary. Shortly after his victory, Greenberg made headlines again as he pushed for his deputy tax collectors to be allowed to carry guns to work, a move opposed by then Attorney General Pam Bondi, by the way. He began wearing his tax collector badge around his neck like a police official, and in December of 2017 flashed the badge to pull over a woman and accuse her of speeding, WESH reported. Now we're getting into creepy territory. A month later, he used his title while trying to sway an actual police officer who had stopped him for driving 39 miles per hour in a 25 zone. And basically it went like this: if there's any way on earth, I'm just trying to stay off the front page of the damn newspaper. Tax collector gets ticket. This is the kind of political crap I have to deal with, Greenberg said in a plea captured on police body camera. In case you were wondering, he got the ticket anyway. Greenberg also navigated a political quagmire after the Orlando Sentinel reported he had inappropriately funneled $3.5 million in taxpayer funds to his friends, including 3 men who were in his wedding party. An independent audit conducted for the county also found he had used public funds to buy body armor, weapons, ammunition, and a drone. He purchased a $90,000 server room to benefit a cryptocurrency company he had created. Those servers, by the way, I mean, it gets worse and worse. This is incredible. Like, okay, he fights to let his deputies carry guns on the job. All right, Florida's kind of gun crazy. They're elected officials. They're tax collectors, but it's not like the sheriff of Nottingham. They don't go door to door knocking, I don't think, on people's doors and saying, give me your money right now, pay me your taxes immediately. But I could see tax collectors could be kind of an unpopular official. But do they really need to be armed? Well, okay, whatever. They leveraged gun craziness in Florida, even over and above the objections of Pam Bondi, to get guns for themselves without having to pay for them. We're in gun crazy Florida. You all want guns, right? Yeah. And you don't want to spend money for your guns, do you? Wouldn't you rather have the state or the county pay for those guns? Oh, yeah, absolutely. But you know what else is expensive? Ammunition. Well, why don't we have the county pay for that too? And wouldn't it be cool to have tactical body armor and be really cool? Yeah, but who's going to, they're definitely not going to pay for that. Oh, yeah? Well, I'm the tax collector. I'll use the office money to pay for it. A drone, I have no idea how they got away with that, except that they said, well, we're kind of quasi-law enforcement. Maybe we need to, I don't know, send a drone to fly over people's houses to see if they are hiding backyard swimming pools while claiming poverty so that they don't have to pay their taxes. I don't know. And I guess it doesn't have to, convince anybody but him. He's the boss. But, okay, so it gets worse. Well, what about, I want to be in cryptocurrency. I want to mine for Bitcoin or whatever the hell, right? Well, there's really no reason why the tax collector's office ought to be able to do that. Well, who cares? I approve all the expenses here. $90,000 now for a server room to create a cryptocurrency company. And then you say, all right, well, that's clearly incorrect expenditure and corrupt, but could it get any worse? Yes. How about if those servers overload a circuit breaker inside the county building and sparked a fire that causes $6,700 in damages that weren't covered by insurance? That happened. Can you believe it? It's like this guy is, snake bit, but he keeps making problems for himself. Last summer, Greenberg's political career came to a crashing halt with federal charges. On June 23rd, federal officers raided his home in Heathrow, Florida, and arrested the tax collector, even with the badge around his neck and everything, and the guns and the body armor, on charges that he had stalked a political adversary, or adversary, if you prefer that pronunciation. He resigned the next day, which is really rare, which must mean he's guilty of doing it. But who would even be worthy of stalking in the tax collector game as a political adversary? And you don't have to stalk them. Send the drone after them. The federal investigators said, maybe he did. Maybe that's how he was stalking them. The federal investigators said Greenberg had posed as a, quote, very concerned student in anonymous letters sent to the school where the political rival worked as a teacher. The letters accused the teacher of having inappropriate sexual contact with the student. How weird, because that's kind of what he was into. The tax collector also created imposter Facebook and Twitter accounts made to look like they belonged to the teacher and wrote posts that portrayed his adversary as a segregationist and in favor of white supremacy. I wonder what that says about this guy. That, according to his indictment, Greenberg himself had a documented history of posting anti-Muslim rhetoric, as Orlando Weekly reported in 2018. In August, federal investigators added charges that Greenberg had used his government position to commit identity theft and accused him of sex trafficking a child. Investigators said they'd found several fake IDs inside Greenberg's home and accused the tax collector of improperly accessing a state database to access personal information of people he was in sugar daddy relationships with. including a minor victim between the ages of 14 and 17. Greenberg allegedly made the fake IDs to help facilitate his efforts to engage in commercial sex acts, according to the indictment. And I don't even, what is that? He's trying to run a prostitution ring with trafficked children? Is that, what else is a commercial sex act? Like, I don't even know. Greenberg was released on bond to await his trial, probably a mistake there, but was taken into custody again in early March after he violated the conditions of his pretrial release, so it obviously was a mistake, by leaving his home after curfew to search for his wife. I didn't even realize there was a wife in all this, although I did remember that they mentioned a wedding party, but it's still his wife and everything after the whole commercial sex act trafficking a minor thing. He went to search for his wife, who told police that she had left to take a break from the stressful situation with Joel. He allegedly used his wife's Snapchat account to track her location. I hope she didn't put up her vaccination card. And showed up at his mother-in-law's home uninvited around 5 a.m. His mother-in-law called the police, and Greenberg was arrested in Seminole County. According to court records, the judge ruled Greenberg should remain in detention until his trial in June. That sounds like the right choice, given the situation. So he's just, the guy is kind of a psychopath. So this article gives you the fuller picture of just what a weirdo he really is. The other articles that I read, the one in the New York Times, was more focused on Gates and his odd relationships, including his social media publicizing of his engagement, which took place at Mar-a-Lago. He spends a lot of time at Mar-a-Lago, which I don't think is all that close to where his actual district is. I think he's a Panhandle guy, right? And Greenberg is associate is Central Florida. Neither of them that close, but Orlando, I guess, not terribly far from Mar-a-Lago. But what Gates from the Panhandle is doing, spending all his time down at Mar-a-Lago, except, being your typical Mar-a-Lago perv, I have no idea what else would drive him to spend that much time traveling to Mar-a-Lago, trying to curry favor with Trump, and or practice his predations in comfortable surroundings, I guess. All right. Well, we'll keep an eye on that one and see how that story develops. Let's see. Oh, yes, right. Just by way of smaller but equally annoying news stories. In the latest in the adventures of Republicans who voted against the COVID relief package, but who are nonetheless launching PR initiatives in their districts, claiming credit for the money being distributed under that bill that they opposed. Madison Cawthorn joins that group, tweeting yesterday that he was happy to announce that North Carolina's 11th district was awarded grants from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and that those grants included $2.4 million to the Appalachian Mountain Community Health Centers, another $4.6 million to Western North Carolina Community Health Services Incorporated, $1.7 million to Bakersville Community Medical Clinic, and $10.4 million to the Blue Ridge Community Health Services. Then he adds at the end, proud to see taxpayer dollars returned to North Carolina 11 through no fault of his own. Of course, he opposed the bill that made those grants possible, but happy to go out there and try and glom on to the credit for it. Poor folks at these community health centers who have to pretend to be grateful to him, even though he did everything he could, which, being a backbencher with no legislative staff and only communication staff, is nothing, of course, but doing everything he could to stop those bills from passing so that that money couldn't have been distributed. But typical, Republican hypocrisy on that one. But just wanted to let you know that, Madison Cawthorn not missing out on that opportunity to be hypocritical. Let's see, other morning news worth sharing here. This one hasn't gotten a mention yet on today's show. The Hill, through Nathaniel Wexel, reporting top Trump advisor pursued his own COVID-19 medical supply deals, documents show. And it's not Jared Kushner, but you might guess if I gave you a couple minutes to think about it. But we'll see. Can you guess before I get to it in the story? A top advisor to former President Trump pursued his own ad hoc strategy for procuring key medical supplies after the president and others in the administration ignored his warnings and failed to implement a national strategy in the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic, according to new documents released Wednesday by House Democrats. So we're talking about a Trump advisor who warned that the administration really needed to move on procuring key medical supplies and was ignored. Do you remember who that might be? It's not a good person. It's not a good guy. They just happened to be able to read the writing on the wall at the time, I guess. In a memo dated March 1st, 2020, former White House trade advisor Peter Navarro warned Trump, and I remember him yelling that he did warn Trump and was ignored, and everybody sort of laughed at him, but I guess he did, warned Trump of the urgent need to, quote, move in Trump time and stay ahead of virus curve, in all caps, these memos, I guess. The memo was among the latest tranche, that's the second use of that term on today's program, of documents released by Democrats on the Select Committee investigating the Trump administration's response to the coronavirus pandemic. These documents provide further evidence that the Trump administration failed to react quickly to the coronavirus pandemic in spring of 2020, despite urgent warnings, failed to implement a national strategy to alleviate critical supply shortages that were putting American lives at risk, and pursued a haphazard and ineffective approach to procurement in which senior White House officials steered contracts to particular companies without adequate diligence or competition. Representative James Clyburn, the Select Committee's chairman, wrote in a letter to Health and Human Services Secretary Javier Becerra. Clyburn wrote to Becerra and other top Biden administration officials on Wednesday, asking the agencies to release additional documents. Clyburn said the committee had been obstructed by the Trump administration. According to the memo, Navarro said there was not enough movement on key actions and urged the administration to invest in drug ingredients, especially those that could not be manufactured in the U.S., as well as rapid handheld coronavirus tests. Navarro criticized the speed of the administration's response and noted that he had been focusing on ensuring sufficient personal protective equipment and procuring accurate diagnostics ever since the first news of a viral outbreak in China. There is no downside risk to taking swift actions as an insurance policy against what may be a very serious public health emergency. That sounds right. If the COVID-19 crisis quickly recedes, the only thing we will have been guilty of is prudence, Navarro wrote. Imagine being right about something. Navarro was rebuffed by Trump, of course, who publicly said the U.S. should not be in the business of acquiring and sending supplies to states. The federal government is not supposed to be out there buying vast amounts of items and then shipping. You know, we're not a shipping clerk, Trump said later that month. But after being ignored, and that's a problem, being ignored. What does he do about it? The documents from the committee show that Navarro and other White House officials pursued their own strategies, pushing federal agencies to issue non-competitive contracts. Navarro gave a $765 million loan to Eastman Kodak to produce ingredients for generic drugs, a $354 million contract to pharmaceutical ingredients to a new company called Flow. That's Phlow, just gross looking for whatever reason, and a $96 million sole source contract to the Airboss Defense Group, or ADG, for powered respirators and filters. Please move this puppy, please move this puppy in Trump time, which of course means 2 weeks, very soon, very strongly going to move this thing. It's interesting that Peter Navarro actually bought the Trump Kool-Aid, that he was like a man of action. Anyway, But he only wanted swift action because I guess these were friends of his. Please move this puppy in Trump time, Navarro wrote to Flo. Oh, okay, interesting. My head is going to explode, and it didn't, which is sad. My head is going to explode if this contract does not get immediately approved. The contract was subsequently awarded without competition. When communicating with ADG executives, Navarro wrote, everything you requested is okay, and the company should trust your government and begin to execute on the contract, even though one had not yet been negotiated or signed. Dangerous. The FEMA ended up awarding the ADG contract in the amount of $96 million for a sole source contract just 6 days later. So, very interesting. Navarro was right in that things needed to move, and he might even have been right in that things needed to move so fast that he should, have contemplated going outside the normal procurement rules. And I guess it will depend in the end on just how close the friendships are between himself and the people who got the money, so that will color the picture of how things look in hindsight. But very interesting, and a potential problem area for Peter Navarro, or I guess a potential of him looking like maybe the only guy who had any sense of urgency about this COVID-19 thing at all, which is maybe a little weird. All right, one more thing we'll squeeze in. Greg mentioned it, but it just seems too good to just gloss over, so let's spend a minute or two on it. Court voids Trump campaign's non-disclosure agreement. So this, too, could really open the floodgates. A pact signed by former Hispanic Outreach Director Jessica Denson is too broad and vague to enforce, a judge says. And most people who looked at these NDAs early on said pretty much the same thing. Turns out they're right. Josh Gerstein reporting for Politico. A federal judge ruled Tuesday that a broad NDA that Trump's 2016 presidential campaign required employees to sign is unenforceable. So look for some new books, I guess, coming out soon. U.S. District Court Judge Paul Gardefes, G-A-R-D-E-P-H-E. His ruling generally steered clear of the constitutional issues presented by such agreements in the context of political campaigns. Instead, the judge, an appointee of President George Bush, W. Bush, by the way, said the sweeping boilerplate language the campaign compelled employees to sign was so vague that the agreement was invalid under New York contract law. As to the scope of the provision, it is, as a practical matter, unlimited. Accordingly, campaign employees are not free to speak about anything concerning the campaign, wrote the judge. The non-disclosure provision is thus much broader than what the campaign asserts is necessary to protect its legitimate interests, and therefore is not reasonable. The 36-page decision, linked herein, said a non-disparagement clause in the agreement was similarly flawed. The campaign's past efforts to enforce the non-disclosure and non-disparagement provisions demonstrate that it is not operating in good faith to protect what it had identified as legitimate interests, the judge added. The evidence before the court instead demonstrates that the campaign has repeatedly sought to enforce the non-disclosure and non-disparagement provisions to suppress speech that it finds detrimental to its interests. The judge issued the ruling in a case brought by Jessica Denson, the Hispanic Outreach Director for Trump in 2016, who accused the campaign of sex discrimination in separate litigation. At one point, the campaign persuaded an arbitrator to issue a $50,000 award against Denson for violating the agreement, but that award was later overturned. So that's why you want to stay out of the hands of arbitrators as well, though at least the system worked for her. I'm overjoyed, Denson told Politico. This president, former president, spent all 4 years aspiring to autocracy, and you tried to help him do that, of course, in the beginning, while claiming that he was a champion of freedom and free speech. There's many people out there who have seen cases like mine and were terrified to speak out. For decades, Trump required such secrecy agreements of his personal employees and staff in his companies. When he jumped into the presidential race in 2016, his lawyers continued to demand NDAs that seemed modeled on those he had previously used in his personal and business affairs. The practice continued into Trump's presidency, despite warnings from First Amendment advocates that it was unconstitutional to demand that public employees swear an oath of secrecy. Precisely who at the White House was required to sign such agreements and what they covered remains something of a mystery, but I guess this opens up the possibility that at the very least they'll be able to declare whether or not they had to sign such agreements, and very likely will be freed from them, and maybe we'll have a flood of, can you believe this, more damaging information about the inner workings of the Trump White House. Could be some exciting times. So stay tuned. We'll see whether that develops into anything further. And I'll tell you what will develop into something further. The West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Coming up next, Justice Putnam has a collection of, well, of course, more stories about Matt Gaetz. You can expect that. Otherwise, Republican governors ignoring the administration's latest plea on mask mandates, and Republican lawmakers looking to strip Arizona of its renewable energy standards. Why? Because F it, we hate everything.
NetworksRadio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
More to come, of course. FBI agents recruiting a Proud Boys leader to provide them with information about Antifa, months before he ended up getting charged with storming the U.S. Capitol. Maybe a bad investment on the FBI's part on that one, but at least they had his phone number when it came time to arrest him. That and more coming up next. See you tomorrow.